Awesome.
All right, we're just recording now. So welcome everyone to Aotearoa Conversations. This is incorporating Te Ao Māori and Pacific values into our food security. We're really wonderful to have our co-facilitators here today, who are Tara Moala and Philippa Holmes. Tara is from Rākau Tautoko and Philippa is from Kai Collective. I will hand over to you both to facilitate. Really looking to a really great session. Thank you very much.
Kia ora, Tan, and kia ora koutou katoa. I'm going to share my screen and then we'll get into it. Everyone can see that? Awesome. Okay. So as tikanga, we're going to start off with a karakia and then we'll go from there. And if you know this karakia, please feel free to join in with us. Ka ino tātou. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā tarataka ki tai. E hi ake ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei, mauri ora. Get ready for the westerly and be prepared for the southerlies. It will be icy cold inland and icy cold on the shore. May the dawn rise red-tipped on ice, on snow, on frost. So, no mai hara mai ki this little workshop here, and we're going to be focusing on incorporating Te Ao Māori and Pacifica values today. But first of all, I thought we could just introduce ourselves and share a little bit about who we are and what we're doing. So, I te taha o tōku mātua, ko pirongia te manga, ko waikato te awa, ko tainui te waka, ko te papa orotu te marae, ko oku heringa whakapapa no haina tōku mātua, no airani rātou ko rebanona, ko koraitia, ko tōku whaia, ko te ukutoia, tōku kainga ki tamaki makaurau, ko te rōpotaka te marae. That's just a little pepeha of mine. So, and it just connects me to the whenua and the marae of my ancestors, as well as all of the different places all over the world, Ireland, Croatia, Lebanon, and China, where my ancestors came from. I am a social entrepreneur. I am the founder and managing director of Rākau Tautoko, which is a limited liability company with charitable status, which works alongside communities to build engagement and empowerment. And I'm also, on my day job, a service and system designer at Tamaki Regeneration Company, where we help to work with the Tamaki community to build new services and systems for our community. So I've been working in the community for more than 20 years now. I started off as a youth worker and moved into social work after a period of time, and then moved into community development and now doing co-design and system design work. I'm going to get Philippa to introduce herself now before we step in.
Whakalawalahi atu. I'm Philippa Holmes. Through my matriarchal lines, that spreads through Samoa and Tonga, and then through me as a matriarch, my two children who also come from Niue and Fiji. So our Pacific household is very much grounded across the South Pacific. I am a social impact designer and social entrepreneur. I'm very keen on the kaupapa of the work and get less wrapped up in the vehicles that we deliver it in. I'm very passionate about the fact that social entrepreneurship is done throughout sectors, but has been quite co-opted by the business sector. So I'm on a lifelong journey to really pull that back in so that our people can see themselves as social entrepreneurs in whatever way they do their work. I've got a social enterprise called Espargo, which is actually morphing into a new journey in the next couple of days, but through Espargo we came together with Rākau Tautoko and many other different community leaders and community groups to form the Kai Collective project. I did a little bit of work around food security over the last couple of years, but in 2020 have been completely, feels like very completely focused on it throughout all the different levels. I've been doing community development for the last 13 years now, and do most of that work really grounded in the Tamaki community of Pamuel Point, England, Glen Innes, And that's really given me the confidence and the experience to take that work and look much more nationally and internationally at what I'd like to do and grow. And so that's who I come to you today as.
So we're going to be talking to you about food insecurity and how we're trying to figure out a solution to that through using the tools that we've got. And this was the catalyst. In March 2020, we experienced a lockdown. All of Aotearoa experienced a lockdown, and we had in our community a very sharp increase in the need in the community for food and how they could access it, how our community could access it. Both of us live in the Glen Innes community, Tamaki, Glen Innes, Pointing, Pamua, and one of our biggest drivers for wanting to see a difference is that we couldn't see anyone else that was doing anything. So we reached out to several different groups of people and just connected up to see what was happening, and really people were struggling without any real need to really any solutions being offered. The standard government line was to go to WINZ, Work and Income New Zealand, or Ministry of Social Development, and unfortunately they were inundated. So most of the whānau that we connected with during that just really said, we sit on the lines for hours trying to get through to anybody to ask for access to food, and we can't get through. So it was really exhausting for these people to be able to experience that. Because Philippa had already connected into food security in her work through her enterprise, she had already started to expand in that, growing the number of parcels and whānau that she was connecting to. And Rākau Tautoko also had connections and relationships with other entities. And so we reached out to those entities and asked them, what's going on and how are you going? And everybody was expanding. They had dropped almost everything else and just focused on getting food to people. And so the Synergy project, the Beat Streets is their project, and they went from about 20 whānau a week to around about 200. It was really fast, and everybody was that fast. It was really, really difficult for them to be able to access the amount of food that they could get, and they didn't know how they could do that. And so what we did was we came together as a collective to try and problem solve that problem and figure out how we could do it in a stronger way. And every single one of us have the foundations of Māori and Pacifica in our ways of working. And so, of course, we leaned on that throughout the whole time. And that's what we'll be sharing with you today. So our collaboration was our definite main ingredient through all of the whole way through, and that helped us to unpack and understand how we could work stronger together. And that came naturally to us because that's what we do on a regular basis. Oh, sorry, that jumped one. There we go. So so these are some of our leaders. So you can see Philippa there. We've also got Ron and his beautiful wife, Donna, who do Beat Streets Synergy projects. They are based out in the Oranga community. We have Carla with the face mask on in our food hub, and she is at Faith Family Baptist Church, and she's been one of our foundations. And then we have Teresa and Kamaka, who one of our local leaders who jumped in as well through Philippa. And so we had a variety of different people with different connections into their communities, different communities that they were reaching out to. Not all of us, we all weren't from the same community. We also hadn't worked with each other in a close way before. We hadn't done projects together in the past in this in depth or this intense, but we did also all have the same values and the same kaupapa. And so that helped to draw us together. So one of the first things that we really did was we really understood that we needed to figure out how to pivot quickly. So we were doing everything individually. So Ron was out there with his van picking up food and getting it out to people. He'd managed to figure out how to do an 0800 number, and he was going out there and doing that. Philippa had pivoted straight over to the Riverside community and jumped in there and managed to access a space and unlock it from the Auckland Council. And we and she was able to get a whole lot of food in there and get it out that way. But we're all doing it quite individually. And so what we realized is that we could actually come together and figure out how we could do bulk purchasing together and how we could use each other's resources better together so that we could lean on each other. For example, we had the access to the site at Riverside through the community centre. We were actually able to replicate that at that Oranga Community Centre for Ron, so that Ron was able to link into there and use those spaces. We also were able to do bulk purchasing, which enabled us to buy a lot more and distribute it out to the different groups. And that little text message on the right hand side was one of our first collective applications, and it was to the quick rapid response funding that Foundation North stood up really, really quickly to be able to give people relief, and it gave us 29K, which enabled us to really, we spent it on petrol and our time and buying food. Majority of it was just buying food. And so Philippa took on the massive responsibility of buying bulk food for everybody and then distributing it out. Do you want to share that experience, Philippa?
Yeah, I think this is like one of the things that really, bulk purchasing showed us the need for different kinds of people to come together to solve a social issue. So I think me and Tara being really social entrepreneurial in our approach, we were able to look at it a bit differently from everyone else, and they too could look at their bit differently on the ground. But bulk purchasing, even with that money, we couldn't spend 25 grand on food, even if we tried. The supermarket shut down and they were like, you can buy 2 pasta a person. And the supermarkets couldn't even chuck it on top of us, because what we found out is that there's essentially 2 big players in New Zealand, obviously Progressive and the other one whose name escapes me. One of them, it's a co-op model, and then the other one, it's a cookie cutter. And neither of them could figure out how to allow food banks and or big councils, whoever, to actually purchase food directly through them through level 4, because they were having such a great need come through them because all the other shops had shut down. And so that was part of us going back out to lots of players and going, this is an issue we need to figure out. And everyone would come back to me and be like, I can do it. In 24 hours, I will sort you out. And every single person was like, this cannot be done. And so we actually have a meeting tomorrow where we hope to finally have heard that there's a bulk purchasing pipeline that's been created in New Zealand. But it's really interesting to look at those bits of an issue that could really alleviate social needs on the ground. That kind of something we are looking at doing is actually putting some of those things on the table and letting those big tricky issues go out and asking people who would like to solve them. Like, there are people from different sectors who actually can come and help with their expertise, but bulk purchasing has been one of those ones which it's really tricky to try and get that amount of food at a really good price. So some people said, I can get you 5,000 units of pasta. They're $3.50 each. And I was like, no, thank you. I need you about $1 or less than $1 price point, because we want to feed as many people for, we want that dollar to stretch. And so that also moved into us going, there really needs to be a way to get funders and philanthropics and people donating food. There has to be better pipelines to be able to get this so that we can all get the best bang for our buck. And so it was all of those things that we were able to really look at, that I think really highlight that social entrepreneurial mindset and lens that becomes really key to figuring out some of these tricky issues that our groups on the ground deal with. But if anyone has great bulk purchasing solutions, feel free to always send me a line. So yeah, it's an interesting one to have money and not be able to spend it as well.
Yeah. And I think the best thing that came out of this was the very first thing, actually, not the best, but was that we were able to take the unsexy stuff, behind the scenes stuff, like all of that, off the hands of our essential workers and help them get out there. So we got and also we want to have, if we're connecting with our Māori and Pacifica whānau, we want Māori and Pacifica knocking on the door. And so when we connect up with them, they are a brown face that's opening that door. They understand the complexities of handing food over. So it's not a, we know that you're needy, and so here we go, here's some food because you can't help and look after yourself. It was more of a, hey, I'm whānau. Here's some kai of mine that I'm sharing with you, and I'm giving manaki. So it's a significantly different relationship that we had, and so we were able to enable those people to be essential workers, and we made sure that they're all on the list and got them all through the right loopholes to be able to do that, while others of us were able to do that and sexy behind the scenes work.
And that's how we sold the project, like sold it to everyone. We said, we'll take care of the unsexy back end, and you do that really intimate community specific bit on the ground. And I think sometimes we scale the wrong ends. And so when we like acknowledged and gave love to the bit that they were experts in and said, we can't scale that, that's intimate, that's person to person, that's community specific, what it meant is that they were like, you see me, you know me, you hear me, and you are our people. And that's what me and Tara kept saying. The reason we got together the groups we did is because they were our people. And if it hadn't been us as social entrepreneurs and social enterprises coming in, it would have looked very different for people who are not their people to try and be solving or helping bring one part of that equation into problem solving.
So one of the ways that we can kind of share that with you guys is through Whakatoki. So a lot of people understand and know Whakatoki, and this is how we interweave it in. So the very first one, actually a lot of these are quite familiar ones, but if you're not aware of them, I'm going to share what they mean. So mā whero mā pango ka oti ai te mahi. This refers to cooperation, where if everyone does their part, the work will be complete. And so from the very beginning, that was what it was like with our peeps. The next one, nāku te rauru, nau te rauru, ka ora ai te iwi. So again, referring to cooperation and the combination of resources to get ahead. So Philippa is the guru at health and safety, and a couple of our other groups are not very good. And so what we do is we enable them to learn about that and get that skills and actually do the templates for them and show them what to read. And we do all the research. And so we can say, actually guys, page 5 and 6 is the most important pages for you to read. So.
Or to be able to say to them like, that's 100% not okay. And like, I say this with love, but never do that again. And I think when it comes from your own people, they're just like, oh yeah, I'll note that and not do it again.
Yeah, one of those examples is hongi or kihi, like giving each other a kiss or an afi and shaking hands and things like that. It's really, really difficult for our whānau, especially our older members. And you can see here, in our picture, we actually have Whaia Margaret, who is one of our amazing people in our community that continuously keeps helping, but she's like in her 80s. We actually don't want her there, but it's like you can tell her to get off the line, but we need to keep her safe. And so, but it's also really difficult for them to be able to let go of that tikanga of being able to physically touch somebody to say hello when they greet. I am sharing my breath with your breath. And yet we know for COVID, we don't want to share any breath. And so, like having to be able to share that, it's definitely going to come better from us as within the whānau compared to others that are not. He ata mea nui o te ao, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. It is most important. That is the most important driver. People are the most important thing. And for us, that was the thing that kept coming back. Not all the time do we have enough funding to keep going. We have such a large percentage of volunteers that it's ridiculous. People don't even understand how we can serve the amount of people that we are serving. It's because people always think what's the main kaupapa is to feed our whānau. And so that's why we're continuously able to do what we can do. Ka pū te ruha, ka hau te rangatiraha. Now this one here is as old net withers, another is remade, and often what that is referred to is the younger ones coming in and taking over and helping the older generation. But actually what I'm referring to in this particular time of using this Whakatoki is actually using new ideas. And so the banks, the food banks, aren't working. we need to stop using the food banks as a solution. What we're doing in the Kai Collective is we're actually empowering local leaders, like we showed in that other image, how that they can reach out to the connections that they have. Our people weren't going to the food banks, they were going to people that they knew and trusted, and we were supporting and empowering those people to get the Kai out to them instead.
Another really interesting thing that we experienced is that over level 4 and 3, the food banks shut down because a lot of their volunteers were older. And so it literally left this gap that our people had to step up into, which has been what has opened up this prime space for disruption, because we were not only able to talk about how we could disrupt the model, we actually did it and showed it. And we were able to see how our groups experienced it and how our people experienced it. And there's now quite this kind of mass energy pushing forward of how things need to be reshaped. And I think what we were able to do is each as part of our group said that's so amazing on the ground, and then me and Tara are able to run with that and actually start pushing the systems change and pushing on the people to make sure that we can see that disruption, positive disruption, happen. But you know, it does mean that some groups get quite upset because we've had a model that's worked that way for many years.
Yeah, carry on, Philippa, and share these whakatoki.
These, which actually me and my sister worked on together, and she is much better at Pacific pronunciation than I am, and I am not going to say them out loud because I did not practice them. But the first one speaks about, it's the Samoan proverb, and it says in English, you can go fast alone, but you can go far together. And I think that's something that sits very much at the heart of what we've experienced. And then the next whakatoki, man, next time I give a speech, I'm gonna practice this stuff, guys. Feeling a little bit of cultural language shame now. Is a Tongan saying. It talks about pigeons in a mound. So it talks about catching a pigeon and cooking a pigeon. And it's about being able to pivot into new situations when needed, and how you often need multiple skills. And that's the person who's the best at their job. And that really spoke well to the work that we did. There were people, I think one of the things for me and Tara, walking into was of social enterprise that looks quite kind of like bright and shiny and businessy and producty, and then also walking in that space of community, is that one of those spaces in a community space, the same people who are writing the funding application, who are meeting with the funders, are also the same people cleaning the toilet, doing all the admin, delivering the food, packing the food. It's insane and not okay that it happens. I just saw that Radio New Zealand piece about how Pacific people are great volunteers, and while it's beautiful, what it glosses over is the cost that it takes from our people to always do this work for free. And what we're really trying to do with this model and with this project, and Tara is really the lead on this, is to remind us where we need to be capturing those costs and asking the system that is meant to be there to support our people to be paying our people for it. And so even though they are so good at doing all these things and pivoting, we also are really mindful that they shouldn't have to. And I think it's from that we've grown, well, how do we make more money, both in a social enterprise term and working with government contracts? But yes, those two for me represented, I think, a lot of what our Pacific people were doing. And going far together is something that we've talked about a lot, but I've really seen it and experienced over this year with our people.
So we made sure that we also incorporated Tuakana, and so this is that whole connecting out. And so we actually, Kai Collective has a very, very strong network, and we have a very wide network. And so we've got pastors, community leaders, community groups in it. And what the key focus is that we have Tuakana in our communities that we're building up and supporting and believing in their role. Just because we're in lockdown 3 or 4 does not mean that they now no longer matter and we want them to stay in their homes. We actually want them activated and motivated. Just because you don't have that essential badge yet doesn't mean that you're not important in the community. And that was one of the things that the system didn't put into play. So it didn't acknowledge that actually police and social workers were not the only ones that we needed on the streets in level 4. What we needed is our tuakana to be able to support our whānaus and our communities. And so we supported them and empowered them to be becoming essential workers through our system. And no evidence of need was required for our whānau. Often they would turn up to our food bank, what are they called? The places that you had in Riverside. Storehouse.
The Panama storehouse, yeah.
Storehouses. We called them storehouses so that people could come and collect what they needed and what they wanted. So we empowered them to do it. But they often would come with the evidence of their need. So they'd bring their bank accounts, or they'd bring their evidence of their paperwork and their birth certificates saying, look, I am needy. And we'd say, put it away. How many kids are in your house? And tell us the real number.
Yeah. Because you always get the fake that they're like 3 and you're like, one more time. We just need to give you an offer, and they're like, all right, 12. Thank you.
So it was like, we're not the system. It's okay. We're not the system. We're not going to tell you off for anything. All we do need to do is to help you. And so that helped people to understand that we actually were there to really help them. And so this is that whole, if you can tell by now, we really intertwine social enterprise and the development of innovative practice with our cultural practices. We're growing a collective that empowers each other for larger opportunities like proposals of funding. And we understood that as whanaungatanga. It was the same thing for us. It was like, yeah, we're growing a collective so that we can apply and we can do something bigger. You can put that in Pākehā terms, or we can just call it whanaungatanga. We're learning what works and making sure that we pivot for what whānau have and what whānau need. And that's Manakitanga. Manakitanga is actually not just giving and generosity, it's actually showing respect for people and understanding where they're at and coming to where they need us to be. That's actually incredibly important, and that's what pivoting is. And a lot of the stuff that we talk about in social and entrepreneurial work is actually really reflective of our Indigenous practices. And advocating for the needs of local whānau to be supported. That's kaitiakitanga, that's understanding the responsibility that we have, and ako as well. Learning and growing and becoming with each other more understanding of where we're at. So what does it look like for us? It looks like these people. It looks like collective decision making on Zoom. We all became experts on Zoom and messenger chats and any kind of Google Meets. However we could meet up, we connected up with. We have collective ownership on it. So that means that our decision making really drives what it is. We don't say, okay, guys, the decision that we're going to make today is whether we buy more baked beans or spaghetti. It's actually, okay, where are we going to put this 100K that we just received? So it's actually giving them true decision-making power and collectively owning that. Cyclical practice for us means that we understand where we're going and where we're going to. And so we always start with giving thanks to each other. Every time we connect up, we're always giving each other aroha, and we're always settling our own wairua in our space. And it sometimes checks Philippa and I, because we're a little bit young, a little bit too fast, really, to be honest. And so they always say, oh, let's start with the karakia, eh, girls? And I was like, yes, let's do that. And also when we have a cyclical process, that means that we actually speed up our spiral upwards. Instead of if we forget to go backwards and reflect before we go forward, we actually slow ourselves down. Whereas with our reflective cyclical practice, what we can do is we can reflect, look, pause, learn from our mistakes, and then go faster as we go forward. So a good learning for both Philippa and I in that. Tuakana Taina development, talked about quite a bit, and holistic collective solutions talks about how we don't just look at the person and what need they have for food, but how they need to receive that food as well. So we need to be able to empower them and support them in that journey as well. So each of us, this is what Philippa was talking about at the very, very beginning around how we do social entrepreneurship and innovation quite differently to what we often see often we see in the limelight limited liability companies that are all nice and shiny and bright and all perfect, and they don't see any of the behind the scenes stuff, and this is exactly what it is. It is not true social enterprise development. And what true community growing enterprise development is a whole lot of different types of people coming together and learning about each other and growing with each other, and having a whole lot of different lenses that we all have to learn how to look through. And so we can have I mean, both Philippa and I aren't religious, and we are surrounded by so many people that are religious, and it's not because we're thinking about joining them. It's actually because we understand the value in seeing through other people's lenses. And so one of our people always brings it back to he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. And that helps us because it enables us to understand the importance of those things. But also we bring with them the lens of social enterprise and goes, yeah, that's cool that you spent 80 hours last week on doing food. How much of those hours are you getting paid for again? So making sure that we each provide each other with different lenses. Want to jump in, Phil?
Yeah, I was going to say one of the really interesting parts of this work has been looking at it like, how do you make this sustainable? So the governments give towards food security. We have the Food Secure Community Contract. There's about 40 players across the country who have it. It's the main MSD contract to solve food insecurity issues, and we're one of, I think, 10 Auckland contract holders under Rākau Tautoko. The government gives us 71 cents per meal. I also don't understand exactly why they wrote it down, because I was like, guys, I would just pretend and write that somewhere where we can't constantly.
Don't know if is anyone else getting this, but it seems to have frozen up a little bit. Hopefully you'll come back to us soon. Thanks for your patience.
But it also means that we're able to really hold that narrative, that social entrepreneurship, innovation, and solving tricky issues. I mean, food security before COVID was, you know, it's one of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. But in New Zealand, this time last year, 500,000 Kiwis needed food support. This time this year, the estimated number is 1.25 million Kiwis. So it is, when we're looking at those issues that we need to solve, something that is critical. It's right now, and it's a real, it's really amazing to be able to learn and lean on the other groups who are doing it in multiple ways. So I think, I really hope as we capture what's been done to solve food security, that we can do it with a really wide lens of how it was done, instead of what is often a very narrow lens that looks like the BAU that didn't serve us before.
Yeah. So if you compare social change, what it could be, what it is and what it could be, this is a little bit straight up, but we are challenging the system to go from European-led, individualized, consumer-driven and punish-driven to Indigenous grounded, collectivism at its core, need-driven instead, and strength-based system. So we're talking about quite a flip of what is the BAU at the moment, and just acknowledging actually that I know that on the left-hand side, that's not BAU for a lot of people, and on the right-hand side, for maybe some people, but on the right-hand side is where we all should be striving to be, and we need to be a little bit more straight up about it and be a little bit more like, hey guys, actually, our current is not cool. Our current is not what we want to be, and where we want to go to is towards something that's a lot better for all of us. So we've done heaps of talking too, and we'd love to start off now with a question. And I think Tan will just keep everybody together. It's small enough, so that's all good. So how about you guys take your mutes off and share with us, how do you guys intertwine, if you guys do? How do you intertwine innovation and cultural minority values? Everyone's thinking deep.
Well, if I can just jump in, thank you so much, really. I mean, I am just, the reason I'm silent is I'm just sitting in awe. And it's not because, you know, you're amazing people only because you truly are, but because of what you've learned and shared with us today. I'm speechless.
Thank you. Thanks, Bruce. How about we flip this question a little bit of how would you like to, or where would you like to see yourself grow?
I think this is such a powerful question to ask. And I work in the public sector, so I work for NZTA, so roads and bridges and stuff, quite different from MSD, but at the same time I'm always struggling with the fact, so I work in the social procurement space, so bringing to life the government's broader outcomes priorities. But for me, there's always this tension between, we've kind of touched on it in a couple of other sessions, this tension between like a Te Ao Māori or Indigenous or a Pasifika or a way of thinking that is not European, and bringing the European system or the Indigenous thought together, or does it just need to be Indigenous thought is actually the better means of thinking and going about this? So it's not even a together, it's we're going with the Indigenous model because that's the model that's going to work. And I sometimes feel like it's just like square peg round hole, and I wonder if we just need to change the shape or go with one shape, and I mean, I don't know how many different research papers and presentations have to say that a Te Ao Māori and Indigenous worldview is good for everyone. I don't know how many more times we have to keep saying that, but that's kind of something that I'm just struggling with this week. It keeps coming up, and I'm not too sure if there's a right answer. Well, there's a right answer, but how to actually action that when we're still operating in this really Eurocentric system.
Yeah, I get that. I completely get that. And especially like, so my day job is working in government, and so I definitely get that and understand that. One of the key things that I've learned, actually, I've only been 6 months at TRC and a long time in community, and so one of the things that I've learned is that we need leaders from the top. We need people at the top that are actually willing to challenge the status quo and say, you know what, I'm not gonna, like it's hard, but we're gonna try. We have to try because we know that it's not good right now. So yeah, thank you, Anna.
I feel like that stat, the stat that you talked about, Philippa, I think so, the food security packages being 500,000 people, and then this year it's 1 million. Like that's a frightening stat, but to me, even to have 500,000 people in our country, and in a pandemic that only doubles, it doesn't like triple or quadruple, like that shows there's a huge issue to start off with, and the pandemic has exacerbated it, but that's a huge amount of people, families, that really shocked me as well.
It's more than 1 in 4, 1 in 5. But it's not fair, right? So so we could say, oh, it's 1 in 5, and then when we look around, it's not 1, 2, 3, 4 that one, 1, 2, 3, 4 that one.
No.
It's actually all of the South Auckland. And so, and then you think, actually, it's all of them who are all Māori and Pacific.
Yeah.
And so that's where the inequity comes in, and that's where privilege plays. And so when we're talking about innovation and social entrepreneurial development, innovation's still happening in Māori and Pacifica communities. It's just that the privilege or the lack of privilege enables them to be able to take action to create that innovative practice.
Yeah.
That's why we have to work 2 or 3 times harder than somebody else that's white, middle class, and has the opportunities of a degree to be able to take that innovative idea to the next level. Whereas like While, who we all saw and heard of at a national scale, challenging, actually, this is actually not fair. We have to go and feed our whānau and working our minimum wage jobs, which aren't even like equity, and then trying to figure out how we survive.
Yeah, and then like you say, get confronted at your own front door with a, oh, I'm so sorry, like here's your food package, like have a nice week, like yeah.
And I think that's what we really wanted to do as well, is create a project that the groups could collectively they could capture what they're doing and share it. So what we saw for COVID as well, a lot of people doing a lot of like clout raising on social media, which is fine if they also did the work. I'm like, go get your picture and clout. Also come and walk on the ground and do some helping. And so for the groups, it was like about being able to with more of us around, we could have someone going, hey, we should really start capturing the stuff and doing it online, so that they too could get that, because everyone has said, oh, but you guys need to get better at like capturing it and raising and you know, so you can raise more resources. And you're like, in which hour would you like me to do this while I'm out here? But collectively we could at least get someone on that. And so that's been really cool to capture for the groups as well, because it's a really interesting conundrum that we've constantly had, is people want to do a story on us and then we're like, oh, you can do it, this is our narrative, and they're like, oh, that's not the narrative I want. And you're like, okay, well, poor hungry brown people needing help from other people is not the one we're going with. And so this creating a whole project meant we could actually together go, no thank you, from 8 different groups. And then that gives them kind of this wave that, oh, maybe the problem is us.
Hey. Oh,
go ahead for it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks, Tara and Philippa, first for sharing your amazing story. It's been really, really fascinating. So when I read your question first, I was like, oh my God, I'm totally out of my comfort zone with that sort of question. And then, you know, I'm like, okay, actually, one of my big projects at the moment, I've been contracted by MSD to do a piece of work with a Samoan community in the south of Auckland. My first question actually to them was, am I the right person? And I mean, we worked on this because I was like, you know, there's a cultural gap here and I'm not in the place either. And we actually, you know, explore that very quickly and find lots of reasons why we could work together and you know, why we could build a really trusting relationship. But how I started this project in terms of bringing innovation to a cultural, you know, group who I'm not part of is actually thinking about some principles of around how we could work together. And the 3 principles I suggested and we agreed on were you know, people first. Like absolutely, like starting with your people, understanding your people and their strengths and their aspirations and their needs. The second one is place-based approach. So despite me not being there, obviously the idea is that we start with your place, which is a piece of land they have in the south of Auckland that they want to turn into a community hub. You know, like let's start with the place and obviously like the assets of the place and the potential of the place and the context in which it sits. And the third one is, I think, if I remember well, agility, and the fact that through this project together in the next 3 months, we've got a plan and we've got an approach and a methodology, but also we're going to be super agile, working together and adapting this plan depending on what comes out of the phases, including community engagement, you know, and actually having that upfront as a principle that we're going to be fluid in the way we work together. So whether that's going to work out or not, I'll tell you in 2 months, but like these are the foundations that we agreed on for that project, trying to bring innovation and system thinking into a community that they would say themselves don't have business, you know, sense or skills, you know, at this stage. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you want to add?
Oh, I was just going to say, I just read Cherish's comment as well. And I was just going to add, we've actually part of this and the different opportunities that have come out from this is last year, Aspargov and Rākau Tautoko ran a social impact summit. This year we're running it again solely on food security. So we can, I don't know, we haven't confirmed the date yet, but it's coming up. But the idea is it takes a look at food security and systems change right from the grassroots to that, you know, system, be it at the food producer end or the government kind of end and all the bits in between. So we're really excited to bring a whole lot of different models there that people can actually look at, pull apart. We're looking at running it online and in real life, depending on how these COVID levels keep playing with our sanity. But yeah, that's going to be a space we can really pull apart some of these things about food security and food sovereignty. And one thing I really wanted to add, though, that's been really important to us is everyone's kind of like, oh, this is so amazing what you guys are doing. But I think that sometimes can take away from the fact that the reason that our people are hungry is because they're being paid minimum wage, no matter how hard they work, because they're operating in a system that doesn't value them as humans, and because they're not having their basic needs being met around food because food is so expensive. And there's some CEO in a yacht at the other end basically being an asshole and not making sure we have affordable food. And so we're solving a problem that never should be a problem because we're stuck in this economic system that has no humanity and kindness to it. And so although this work is great, And we don't want to be in that space forever. And we want to constantly remind people that we're challenging something that's really inhumane. We're just trying to do the best we can in what is very much an unethical situation.
Shall we move on to the next question, which is, what other innovative community-led responses to COVID-19 do we know of? So what else is going out there? Does everyone know? Anyone know any that's innovative and responding?
Kia ora, korua. Tēnā korua mō tō korua kōrero I te rānei. Waihoki ki ngā kaimahi, ki ngā ringarau pākatoa o te Kai Collective. I work at Te Whānau Waipareta, which is part of Te Paeherenga or Tāmaki Collective, and we did the hygiene packs. That was something that the whānau ora commissioning agencies across the whole of the North Island came together to do. So straight away we looked at what were some of the supplies that whānau may need at this time, and it was a logistical nightmare, but we did it, and we got hundreds of packs, thousands of packs out to whānau, so they had all those basic things if they wanted to leave their party.
Awesome. And we actually received some of those packs.
Cool.
Like, we may need to talk after, Alice, about oh, hang on, babe. About a particular issue we had with the sanitizer we have currently. So if you could somehow get in contact with us after, that would be great.
Okay, it's fine.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, but it was massive. The amount of parcels, the amount of boxes that you guys got out and to the different groups, it was pretty impressive. And the machinery that you guys were able to activate, and I think part of that was because of that already established relationship that you had with all the whānau order providers, right?
Yeah.
And so able to connect up with all those different providers, and then to use as it's like a spider web of being able to get out to the different groups.
Exactly. It was like the collective had been we'd been connecting for so long that it was ready, and it was probably like the first time that we've taken that we've been able to actually like put into practice the approach that we've been trying to get ready for so long.
And it was so like, so whānau ora connecting up with each whānau that are in need in a holistic wraparound way and supporting a lot, but actually activating those same lines to do something as simple as getting boxes out of of hygiene needs. That was that's such an innovative response in that time of crisis. So well done.
And Tamaki, what it showed us as well, and it wasn't a bad hygiene need I added, just like a question, and I was trying to figure out who to talk to, and I was like, well, you're here. But what it showed us in Tamaki is that a lot of our Pacific community were like, we don't have those same veins going out, so we couldn't disperse needs amongst the Pacific in the same way that we could see it being dispersed between Māori and Marae and iwi groups. And so something they've really been speaking about very strongly is that, what does that model look like for Pacific? That, like, because it went to some of the big organizations and it got to agencies, but it didn't get into homes the same way we could see it happening for Māori. So it was a real interesting one for us to go, there's some real learning for us, and like, how can we have better relationships to kind of do that as well.
Any other innovative activities that happened in or in response to the lockdowns? All good. Or anything else? Let's open it up for the last few minutes. Anything else that anybody would like to share or say before we finish off with the karakia whakamutunga?
I'd just love to know what's next for you guys, because obviously the need will not go away. So what's the kind of next plan?
I spoke the most, Phil, so you can do it.
Yeah, I mean, the next plan for us is the contract gives us sustainability up until February. I think it's actually the beginning of February, and we've got one of the collective members has gifted us, well, we koha to their space to use it as the food hub. So the Kai Collective project essentially is like a food bank for local organisations and community leaders and groups to meet the food security needs of their people. But it also means that we need X amount of space for storage, holding food safely, all of that. So our number one priority is to ensure that we can have that moving forward from March onwards. So we need a space, we need people to be able to run that on the ground, which is paid time. So I've got a project I'm working on, a social enterprise label that I'm hoping to bring that will have a space that hopefully we can bring the hub into it, and we can run, like, so we can not have to pay for that work. But it's still all, like, when we were doing the bit capturing people's thoughts, I said to Ron from Synergy, what will happen if we can't carry this on? And he said, well, we'll keep going, but we'll go back to, you know, begging, borrowing and stealing as much as we can to get to where we need to go. And so at the forefront of my mind always is that's the only thing that we know will have to happen if we can't make it sustainable. But the cost of supporting people in food security, the difference between companies being able to, even with rescue food, chuck it in the bin, or government being able to adequately provide, that is, you know, like, we're not sure how that's going to happen, but the cost of actually capturing that stuff, getting food, paying people, paying transport, paying something to hold it safely, getting all those things set up and then getting it into homes is such a high cost model that we need to keep working as quick as we can, running through as many doors as we can. But overall, our aim is to make sure that our people have high enough incomes to meet their own needs, because then we wouldn't have to try and figure out many creative ways to try and bring them food to their door, and they instead can get to a supermarket themselves.
Yeah, or any other kind of access to food. So we'd love to see more opportunities in the community where we're growing our own, that we've got our own food farms in our cities, that our whānau can share between each other and connect up. And we're in Auckland, right? And so one of the larger things that we're experiencing is our whānau's being moved around because of the intensification of our communities. And so Kāinga Ora, TRC, who I'm working for, different groups are actually intensifying, tripling the amount of houses that are here. And what they're doing in that time is they're actually separating out whānau. And so people that have been living there all their lives and now all of a sudden being moved away from their streets and moving away from the neighbour that was right next door. What that does for food insecurity is it expands it, because when neighbour number one has food, that extra food, then neighbour number two has extra food because of their relationship. But as soon as they move away and separate from each other, then that causes problems with how they can access that. Now, the most impacted whānau that are affected by that are our elderly Māori and Pacific, because they're the ones that are people like me make sure that we cook extra food and take it over and say, oh, we've got extra food, we don't want to go to waste, can you please take this kai off our hands? Every day. So if we can't do that because of the systems in place and the movement of people out of everyone's control, that's really, really difficult. And so we need to be very conscious and aware of the impact that our beautification and creation of a stronger city is doing to our most in need whānau, and exasperating the problems that we have with food insecurity. So it's another whittle that we have, but if we can figure out a way to encourage people to have like the collective pātaka kai, which are an amazing opportunity to access food, having social supermarkets where food, instead of going to waste, is actually being transported over to the social supermarkets that people can get for cost or free. So there are several different opportunities. We often will do like free dinners and things like that as well, and so and free meals at any time of the day. And so those sort of things, if we make them the norm, then we're halfway there, and then the other half is increasing our minimum wage. That could start. It's a good start. Yeah. Oh, it is 2 minutes too. So isn't that perfect timing for finishing off? So how about I share the screen one last time so that I can share our karakia. That's up, eh? So before I do, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Thank you for listening. Thank you for understanding what it is like. I love that everybody was nodding and smiling in all those right times. So thank you for that. It's really hard on Zoom. It can be really difficult to read the wairoa of a room, read the wairoa of a Zoom. So ngā mihi nui for all of the passion that you each do and all of the work that you do, and may you go well on your journeys. Ka inoi tātou. Kia whakairia te tapu, kia wātea ai te ara, kia turiki whakataha ai, kia turiki whakataha ai. Haumi e, hui e, tae ki e. Restrictions are moved aside, so the pathways are clear to return to everyday activities. Ka kite.
Ka kite.
Got it both. Have an awesome day, guys.
That's fabulous.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.